Welcome to the Pioneer Made to Grow podcast. My name's Andrew Campbell. We continue with our podcast here from Denver at Commodity Classic with a great episode looking at what technology, the role that it can play in helping all of us growers improve our profitability. With me today, we've got Jim, Emeritus Professor from Purdue University. Chad is an assistant professor from Purdue. They're both speaking on this very issue here at Commodity Classic. And we've got Trenton Brisby with Pioneer. He's the North American Marketing Manager. So guys, this subject really kind of came up from me flipping through the program, and I couldn't help but be interested in what you were talking to growers about, because especially at something like this, we talk a lot about marketing, we talk a lot about agronomy, but technology today can play such an important role in how we can improve our profitability. Maybe start with you, Chad. Just kind of give me an idea, give me a rundown in what that key message you're trying to get across to growers is tomorrow.
Okay, sure. So I'll give a tiny bit of backstory. So I farmed for 10 years before going back to grad school. So a lot of sort of my interest in research and the way I think through things is largely formed by being frustrated as a producer and trying to sort through things. So I'm nearly 40, and so like kind of the precision ag boom happened while I was farming, and so like kind of as an undergrad student really encountered it, and then as I was farming, just the immensity of options around what technologies you could adopt and their supposed benefits have been very difficult to understand. And then as a researcher getting into it and realizing we don't have a lot of great sort of all-encompassing or holistic research around sort of how does technology play in. So I joke that a lot of times I'm a wet blanket on some things, but my kind of message tomorrow is like maybe we can take time evaluating technologies as opposed to needing to kind of jump on stuff right at the very beginning to understand how does it impact not only sort of the specific problem the technology is designed to solve, but also how does it work into the larger system of your farm.
Because, Jim, I think one of the challenges for me as a grower is just what's out there. There's always something new coming this year. We don't know how it fits with the last thing. Is it a thing that, from growers that you talk to and some of the research that you do, is this a common problem that growers just almost are too confused about what they should be doing?
Well, there's lots of challenges with respect to all the technology that's out there, and we've done some survey work with farmers where we actually were able to categorize their level of usage. And we categorized it into 4 broad categories, but when you look on the upper end, the people that are using more and more of the technology, one of the things that Chad and I were really interested in was ascertaining how much of a gain is there associated with being that first mover, the person who first adopts technology versus the user who maybe waits a little while to see if that technology is proven out. And the gain in efficiency from being a first mover was very, very small. So I think one of the messages we'll convey to farmers tomorrow is that you don't have to worry about being the first person in your neighborhood or your state to adopt a new technology. It's okay to wait a little while and see if that technology really is going to play out and ascertain whether or not it might be useful on your farm. And I think that's something people worry about when they see this tremendous amount of new technology. If, for example, here at the Commodity Classic, where there are an almost endless series of booths advocating that you adopt some new technology. How do you sort through that? You don't have to worry about being the very first person. You can follow up and see how that's worked on other farms and then think about how that might fit into your farm operation.
Well, and Trent, I think I'd probably fit in that category. I don't want to be the very first. I like taking a little bit of risk. I don't want to take all the risk and be the one to figure it out. Probably because I just been burned a couple of times doing that. But I think I wonder, from growers that you're talking to, we talked a little earlier about kind of that shiny new thing that you just want to jump on because, man, wouldn't that be cool to see that? Would you agree kind of maybe that approach isn't always the right approach?
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. I think there's a component here in the industry itself. Some things that we see is like, hey, we've got this data. What do we do with it? Hey, there's this, like I said, new shiny thing out there. We need to go to it. And, some of the things we're starting to do a little bit is we need to get back to the basics a little bit and understanding what do you have and making sure that we're doing that right. Kind of an example that I would share is, we're doing a pilot right now with John Deere, and you would be surprised, and maybe you wouldn't be, is that the number one product that we see when growers are putting their information is seed corn, or Pioneer, or One. And they name their fields A, B, C, D, E, F sometimes, just because we don't really take the time. And so how do we slow down a little bit, I think to all of your point, and understand what is it we're trying to achieve? Now with that said, I think there is some technology out there that growers can use and have out there and make an impact right away. I think we always got to try some of it, but I think as what we were alluding to is like, what are we paying for? Should we be paying for that? There's that component to it, and there's some things that we're doing at Pioneer right now of really starting to think about that. Is like when you buy a bag of seed, we're really working with our Pioneer dealers and our agencies to say, hey, when you buy this, like this type of technology is coming with, right? And I think that's also a fundamental change in the industry right now, from what I'm seeing from everybody else.
Okay, so then here's the challenge, Chad, is in terms of, I don't want to be the first, which is fine, but I want the technology that is got at least some proof in terms of profitability. How do I know where to start, and what I should actually be picking here?
Oh man, so I fear like I'm going to lose the audience, but I'm going to say it anyway. One of the things that as a producer, when I encountered sort of these challenges and trying to put numbers to is what even guesses, good guesses as to what is this thing going to return to me, what it's going to cost me. I largely threw up my hands and said I couldn't possibly sort of, it's just not worth my time to spend time thinking and doing this. Where my challenge to producers is you do know how to do this. You inherently do this on a regular basis in your mind. And so formalizing that process and getting it written down, try to find university trials or talk to your neighbors or doing your own sort of farm research. It doesn't have to be farm research as in like 400 replications on 2.5 acres. Like it can literally be just like run some check strips. How's it going? What are you seeing as you use this technology? And I think you can do that broadly. My challenge to producers is like, don't just throw up your hands. Like engage the process. You're definitely capable of doing that. I wish someone had looked at me while I was producing and said like, hey, stop. Because I think when you said you would be surprised. Sometimes I think if people really understood sort of my job and the way I think through things, they'd be like, oh, really? That's it? So in some senses, like I would just hope, I would say, like have confidence, right? Try to put out there, what do you think the possible benefits could be from this technology and what are the costs? And then say, is the number justifiable? Should we go for it or not?
Because Jim, in some of that survey data that you've done, what do growers feel about this? There are obviously the ones that are going to jump in right away, and maybe that profit, that return on investment isn't quite there. But like, are the majority of other growers saying, yeah, I really want to do technology, I'm just not sure? Or are some, and in our area, I think you run into the problem that some are like, man, there's just too much of this. It is too complicated. I don't necessarily know where to start, so I'll just leave it alone.
No, we definitely had some of those in our survey data. And we focused more of our attention on the folks who had adopted a fair amount of technology versus the folks that basically tried to adopt almost everything. And I think really the message that came out of that research was the idea that there is no single silver bullet. The people that were benefiting the most were the ones that were approaching this from more of a system perspective and thinking about technology from a bundle perspective. And in terms of what we're going to talk about during our session tomorrow, one of the things we're going to ask the question of the audience is, what problem on your farm are you trying to solve? And then think about it from more of a system perspective, because there's probably not a single thing you're going to do that's going to solve that problem. It's probably going to be several things that come together. And it was very clear in our research the people that were benefiting the most were people that had figured out how to bundle technologies to address the problems their farm faced. But the starting point, what problem am I trying to solve? Then thinking about what applications can help me solve that problem.
And when you talk about bundling, I'm just kind of curious. I know if I open my phone right now, I have 9 apps that deal with different levels of the farm. Is that kind of a case of trying to consolidate that, or what do you mean when you say bundling?
Well, for example, somebody might be looking at collecting data on their farm with respect to plant populations. Okay, what are you doing with that data? How are you analyzing it? What way are you approaching that? Is it just yield maps? That's probably not adequate. Are you doing something a little farther along with respect to analyzing the data, either you individually on your own or working with a consultant? And for many farmers, it might be working with a consultant because they don't have time to do that on their own, right? So, one of the things we've run into talking to farmers in Indiana and throughout the Midwest, for example, is there's been a lot of data collected that nobody's ever really looked at, right? There's information in that data that you could use to make better inferences about decisions, but you're going to have to go to that next level. And what we've run into is some people that have quote unquote adopted a technology, but they haven't really gained the benefits from that technology because they haven't taken that next step. So modeling is a variety of different things, but you're right. It can mean a combination of soil testing, doing some testing with respect to plant populations, et cetera, row spacing, you name it. But then are you actually analyzing the data, you or somebody else, to actually draw some inferences? And the last thing I would say is we've uncovered there's the folks that are sharing data with other farms are benefiting more than people that are trying to make decisions only based on the data they've collected. And we've run into a lot of that with this idea that, my geography is very specific. I've got to collect data on my farm. The folks that are benefiting the most are the ones that are sharing data and looking at it from a broader perspective.
And Trent, I think that is one of those when you talk about, some of the stuff that you're trying to do, especially with pilot with John Deere, it is about trying to pull some more of that. It must be about more to pull some of that information than you're going to get if it shows up, Variety Pioneer in field A on line AXG2 because we made a new line this year that we didn't use from past years. Like, it must be about trying to help growers with that.
It is all about helping growers with that. We spend a lot of time at Pioneer walking fields, walking plots, studying our products. We believe right product, right acre. It's all about the positioning. I mean, every month we are going through some sort of product training, right? We spend a lot of time. And when we do that and we do field by field placements, it's really important. We've seen where if we put wrong product on wrong acre, sometimes it doesn't treat us right, And so when that happens, how do we use technology to ensure that we're planting things in the right spot? As part of this pilot project, again, we're able to take our invoice products, push them right into the John Deere Operations Center, and then that goes right into the monitor. That's step one. If we do that right, okay, we got a good clean data set potentially at that point. Step two is we do these field by field plans. We're now able to push those to John Deere Op, and then when the grower goes to the field, they get a pop-up in their monitor now that says, hey, do you want this work plan? Right product, right acre, right rate, which is huge, right? We know that a lot of farms have a lot of people that work there. So there's a whole time of we got to reduce, we got to make efficiency, and we got to reduce the time. We got to reduce the clicks. Like, building a plan is huge, and I think that's something we take for granted a lot of times. It's the planning process, and I think you kind of alluded to that of like doing your research, doing the planning. There's a lot we're doing, but if we could sit down and plan better, by the time we hit the field, we're probably going to get a better outcome. Right? And again, that goes back to profitability. Right product, right acre, right rate. We got to maximize every kernel that we put in the field. This is a great way to do it. It's a simple task. It's a simple task that we overlook.
Jim asked a question that I think is probably the most important one when we're thinking about that technology. And what kind of problem are we trying to solve? So Chad, I guess I kind of pose that in all your work. What are the biggest problems that growers need to try to solve when it comes to the technology they should actually be looking at?
Wow.
Easy.
That is a big question. I think I would answer it with when we're thinking about seed, right? And then the problem that seed is solving, and how does the technology support that, right? In your case, you're saying we're gonna utilize this seed better if we have the right plan in place. To me, that problem is you want good stands, you want, right? Like you're putting appropriate technologies around that specific problem. So in my head, the way I would basically largely not answer your question would be saying, like, what has made the farm special and successful in the past? And how do we kind of use technology to continue down that path, as opposed to sort of like regrouping and doing something different? So we've had this conversation, and Jim could tell the story even better about, if you think what you need is a bigger combine, and then you buy a bigger combine, and then all of a sudden you realize that, oh no, it was we needed more trucks. And then we got more trucks, and then we realized, well, the pit's not fast enough. We can't dump the trucks fast enough. And then when we got the trucks dumping fast enough, then the dryer wasn't, and we didn't really get back to sort of the root problem. So I would say, again, not answering your question, but like just trying to get back to what is that root problem. And I think like I would applaud Pioneer on this idea that like you're putting technology to solve the specific problem that you're addressing versus sort of indirect, right? Like we have this other thing too. So sorry, that was a terrible answer, but I think like that would be the way I would talk through it.
Well, and I think, Jim, when you kind of talk about the survey results in terms of, growers that are using it the most, there must be a little bit of a trend in some of that, in some of the technologies they're using, in terms of what are the problems that you think growers are trying to solve based on the technology they're using?
Yeah, that's a good question. So if you look at it, people are clearly looking at things like, how does yield vary as I move across a field or as I change fields, right? And so some of them are trying to figure out, do I need to be changing variety plant populations as I move across the field? Or is it really just a case of maybe I only want to change it when I change hybrids? Or do I only want to change it when I change soil types? They're trying to sort out that kind of information. And that's a tough one to answer, right? So they're going to get some different answers depending on who they talk to. Our perspective is, it's probably more important to make sure you're looking at whether or not you've got yield variability that's attributable to those kind of factors, or is there some other problem? Chad kind of alluded to it. Is the problem, maybe I'm not getting it planted on time. Yeah. Maybe I'm not getting it harvested on time. Maybe I'm letting it stand in the field too long in the fall. We didn't talk about machinery, but one of the things we talk about a lot is, what is your machinery capacity relative to your acreage? One of the challenges we ran into, one of our speakers at our Top Farmer Conference brought this up when we had that conference back in January. As you look at farms today, do you have excess machinery on your farm because you don't fully recognize the capacity of what some of these new machines can do? I'm specifically thinking about, for example, some of the new combines. How many acres you can really cover with a single machine versus having two machines? Do you need two machines, two corn heads, two grain heads, etc.? So there can be a variety of different things that people are looking at, but at the end of the day, it does come back to trying to assess what is the problem I'm trying to solve on this farm. And then I guess I would add to what Chad said, which is, okay, maybe deep down inside, I recognize that I'm not the most efficient farm operation out there. I want to emulate what some other people are doing. I want to learn from what some of those other people are doing. And that's where the data sharing can really come back to help you, right? Not every farm is top-notch efficient. And so the question is, how can I become best in class? That's really where you want to head. And from a longer-term perspective, you're not going to have that ability to make that ascertain what's going on there without sharing data and looking at other people's information.
Well, and then I think, Trent, that fits well in terms of, just the model of not only working with other growers, which I think is really important to share that data, but working with an agronomist, working with reps, working with kind of everybody in your community to try to solve a lot of those issues, which I think, fits well with the model that you're trying to build.
I like how you guys talked about what is the problem. And the things I think about is every grower is in a different journey in this technology space, right? If we look at the bell-shaped curve of, we've got everybody from the laggards to the top 10-15% that's adopting technology. And so we're doing a lot for the middle masses to try to help, the basics. But we're also doing some things on the front end. So if we talk about the front end of all the planning that I talked about, then there's the component in the middle is the growing season. And there's some technologies that are out there. We're piloting some right now. One of them is it's fungicide timing. When's the right time to spray a fungicide? We're using as planted data to do that. We're using the products that we know with trait scores to do that. That solves a problem for somebody in the season right now, right? And there's a group of growers that says, I want that. There's another where we're doing what's called silage staging. We're helping growers when's the right time to chop, because it's really important to have good quality silage, right? And go out there and get that. And that works for making sure that they get the right milk that they need, the producing. And so those are some things we're doing there. But then I think there's this component at the end of, okay, if we entered everything in right, we use some of these things to help me with the problems that I have there, I got to do some sort of analysis at the end of the season. And to me, it's a system, and it's not a one-size-fit-all system. I think the one size is at the beginning, we got a plan, we got to find the problem. Then there's some things in the middle, but then we got to have a conversation. I like how you're talking about the conversation we have to have of what's working, what's not working. There's so many different ways to potentially slice, dice data, but if you don't understand the problem you don't know how to go slice and dice. And so we're trying to think through it in that aspect and using tools like Granular Insights, working with our Pioneer sales representatives, the agronomists. Again, what are you trying to solve? Is it the right seeding rate? Is it the right planting date? Is there different things we should be using? Fungicide, what's the time to them? Biologicals, when should I turn my water or my pivot on for water in Nebraska and places like that? Like those are all problems we're trying to help with. So we are trying to be very well-rounded, but it all starts with the beginning. And I love how you guys talked about hey, what's the problem you're trying to solve? Because it's complex.
Well, and because the technology clearly is not going to slow down in terms of how quickly it comes. We could talk all day in terms of what AI can bring to the table and all sorts of things. But at the end of the day, I love how well that's framed in terms of just what's the problem we're trying to solve, and let's find the technology to do that. So, Trent, Chad, Jim, thanks very much for joining the podcast.
Okay.
And that does it for this episode of the Pioneer Made to Grow podcast. Don't forget, you can always subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts, or watch us on YouTube at the Corteva Canada channel. And if you ever need more information or advice, you can ask your local Pioneer rep or visit pioneer.com/Canada.